Sophia, best girl. Life and material. 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 Do I look like a cam girl to you? I need this for drugs. My fortress of solitude. Hey, what's going on, everybody? It is Artie of Artie's Corporate Fiction. Welcome to a very, very special live stream. I'm going to keep it short, sweet, so you guys can have the opportunity to listen to it again if you wish. I doubt it, but we'll see what happens at the end of it. So I was, somebody in Discord sent me a link to this case, but he got it from somebody from the r/sovereign-citizen Reddit channel. I apologize. The name escapes me. Let me see if I can get that up here real quick. Oh, shoot. It was YI3K6C, I believe, is the name of the is that the name of the author? Uh-oh. I get that author? IKCAJ is the user who found this on r/sovereign-citizen, and I will be doing a very special dramatic reading of the court case. This is involves a traffic case. I will not spoil the ending, of course, but I will do a dramatic reading for you guys because I believe the judge had a lost calling to be an excellent fiction writer, but unfortunately, or fortunately, he elected to go the route of being a justice of the peace or justice in Canada. So, without further ado, bear in mind that this is a 2013 case. So yes, this is in the Her Majesty the Queen. But let us go.
Her Majesty the Queen and Matthew Duncan. The Ontario Court of Justice. Before Justice Fergus O'Donnell had, on 27th of July and 23rd of October 2012, oral decision rendered on 23rd of October 2012, reasons for judgment release on 26th of March 2013. You should get out of town, the man said. And so began the journey that resulted in my pal intersecting with Matthew. And thence to these reasons with a slight detour through territory that might infuse Lewis Carroll. I suppose that I should clarify that there was no menace in the man's directed to me to get out of town. He was a friend and a colleague in 2 careers. His suggestion had been that he and I should change positions for a fortnight, giving him exposure to the realities of the northern regions of Ontario, while I would enjoy a similar change of environment in the more sylvan environs of Niagara region. I might even see if he plays in the evening, he pointed out. And thus, I came to meet Mr. Duncan. At heart, Mr. Duncan's case was unremarkable. A minor alleged Highway Traffic Act offense led to a police-citizen interaction in the parking lot of Mr. Duncan's apartment building in the wee hours of the morning. A request that Mr. Duncan produce his license led to an alleged refusal, which led to an attempt to arrest him, which led to a struggle, which was captured on very poor quality video taken on a mobile phone, at the end of which Mr. Duncan found himself being placed under arrest for allegedly assaulting a police officer. Nothing unusual about the bread and butter of provisional court. Of course, I hadn't counted on the freemen on the land. Mr. Duncan was self-represented. Other than a mildly annoying disinclination on his part to stand when addressing the court, although he did stand when questioning witnesses, he was a rather pleasant young man. Unfortunately, he was a rather pleasant young man whose mind was filled with that my late father would have called notions. Fifth, I should point out that Mr. Duncan preferred not to be called Mr. Duncan, but rather Matthew. There was some mumbo-jumbo about the natural person and the administrator, and that one of them might have been Mr. Duncan and one might have been Matthew, and one, but not both, of them might have been the same person speaking to me in court, well seated. However, when I read the affidavit of truth presented to me by Mr. Duncan, I noticed that it had been sworn by someone whose first name was clearly Matthew, and whose second name looked very much like Duncan, and certainly began with a D and a U. Since Mr. Duncan agreed that the affidavit had been sworn by him and accepted my proposition that there is no D and no U in the name Matthew, I continued to refer to him as Mr. Duncan through the proceedings. Section 8. It has been said, given enough time, 10,000 monkeys with typewriters would probably eventually replicate the collected works of Shakespeare. Sadly, when human beings are let loose with computers and internet access, their work product does not necessarily compare favorably to the aforementioned monkeys with typewriters. Thus it was the trial began with Mr. Duncan objecting to us proceeding on the basis that I had no jurisdiction over him. Mr. Duncan provided me with an affidavit of truth, a rather substantial volume that appeared to me to be the result of somebody doing a Google search for terms like jurisdiction and the like, and then cobbling them together in such a way that it makes James Joyce's Ulysses look like an easy read. This hodgepodge of irrelevancies relied upon by Mr. Duncan was one of the misbegotten fruits of the internet. Finding it was a waste of time of Mr. Duncan's time, printing it was a waste of trees, and my reading it was a waste of my time and public money. With that volume as a starting point, Mr. Duncan spent some time explaining to me that I had no jurisdiction to try him, that he was not a citizen of the province or the country, and that he was not a person as defined by my definitions, and there was no contract between him and me to give me status to sit in judgment over the human soul. As I had said, Mr. Duncan struck me as a perfectly pleasant young man, but on this issue he seemed a bit obtuse. I suppose that if perfectly pleasant young men were led astray from the time to buy drugs, alcohol, breaking hearts of the rubbish on the internet, then the dockets of provincial court wouldn't be quite as plump as they usually are. After much toing and froing about jurisdiction, either Mr. Duncan or Matthew or his administrator, I'm never quite sure which, they were all talking through the same corporeal form, entered a plea of not guilty on Mr. Duncan's behalf, and we proceeded to the evidence. The Crown's first witness was Constable Paul Ellis, a relatively junior member of the Niagara Regional Police Service, and the alleged victim of the assault to resist arrest. Constable Ellis testified that on the night of 1-2 December 2011, he and his partner Constable Pilkington were on uniform patrol in Tuesday at 2:48 a.m. when they saw a car driven by Mr. Duncan make a right turn onto Slessor Boulevard in Grimsby without signaling the turn. The car then pulled into the parking lot of an apartment building on Slessor where Mr. Duncan lived, and the police car pulled in after Mr. Duncan's car. Mr. Duncan and Constable Ells got out of the cars, and Constable Ells asked Mr. Duncan for his identification, specifically a driver's license. Later, in response to a rather leading question on a highly material point, Constable Ells said that he also asked for even a verbal identification. He said that he and Constable Pilkington repeatedly asked for identification who warned Mr. Duncan and he would be arrested if he failed to do so. At some point in this interaction, Constable Ells said that Mr. Duncan pulled out a red binder, and Constable Ells told Constable Ells that he would be giving him a fee schedule. He told the officers that they had no jurisdiction over him, and accordingly had no authority to arrest him.
Uh-oh. I broke something. Hang on. Sorry.
And then, Constable Ellis then told him that he was under arrest for failure to identify under the Lower Traffic Act. Mr. Duncan then allegedly pulled away from Constable Ells' efforts to grab his arm and started walking toward the apartment building. Constable Ells repeatedly told him to put his hand behind his back and stop resisting arrest, but Mr. Duncan put his hands to his front instead. A struggle ensued, with Mr. Duncan ultimately being subdued and handcuffed about 5 minutes after being told he was under arrest. Constable Ells described the alleged assault on him as thus. He had tried to ground Mr. Duncan by grabbing his left leg. While he was bent over for that purpose, he felt a push and pull on his back. At this point, Mr. Duncan was off to Constable Ells' right, and Constable Pilkington was to the right of Mr. Duncan. Later, when they were up by a fence near the back door of the building, Mr. Duncan was swinging his arms. Mr. Duncan ignored a warning by Constable Pilkington that he would be tasered, and he was, in due course, tasered, taken to the ground, and handcuffed. In cross-examination, Constable Ells said that he and his partner were directly behind Mr. Duncan when he failed to signal. Constable Shane Sicard is an officer with the NRPS Technological Crime Unit. He led in evidence a YouTube video of the interaction between Mr. Duncan and the police that Constable Pilkington had brought to his attention. Given the darkness, the video was of very poor quality and not particularly helpful. Constable Pilkington also testified. He generally confirmed Constable Ells' description of the events surrounding Mr. Duncan's stop and the arrest for identification. Our Constable Pilkington's description of Mr. Duncan's alleged assaultive behavior were beyond doubt described by Constable Ells. By Pilkington's telling, early on, Mr. Duncan tried to push both him and Constable Ells and was kicking at the both of them. Then, when Constable Ells was bent over to grab Mr. Duncan's leg, Constable Pilkington had a better viewing angle and understandably could actually see Mr. Duncan grabbing Constable Ells' body armor from behind. Constable Pilkington responded by grabbing Mr. Duncan off Constable Pilkington, and they all continued their dance towards the back door of Mr. Duncan's apartment building. Pilkington said that Mr. Duncan tried to grab his taser, but Pilkington kept him away from it, and Mr. Duncan continued resisting. According to Constable Pilkington, Mr. Duncan then got away from him, and Ells and Pilkington moved in behind Mr. Duncan. From that perspective, Pilkington saw Duncan kicking towards Ells and had his fist raised in the air in a haymaker position and swung it at Constable Ells. In response to this, Constable Pilkington said he drew his taser, removed the barb cartridge, and stunned Mr. Duncan with a direct contact between the shoulder blades. This caused Mr. Duncan to go to the ground, whereupon he was cuffed, although, according to Constable Pilkington, he continued to struggle after being handcuffed. It will be noted that there were some discrepancies between the versions of Ells and Pilkington. Pilkington makes no reference to Duncan about the use of the taser. Pilkington refers to substantially more assaultive behavior than Ells, including the raised haymaker towards Ells, who Pilkington believed was actually face on to Mr. Duncan at the time of this significant punching motion. These are arguably not trivial discrepancies, although they may reflect the inherent differences in two people seeing the same event from different perspectives. Looking to specifically testified that the reason for the traffic stop which led to the demand to identify which led to the arrest for failure to identify was the failure to signal the right-hand turn. We did not finish Mr. Duncan's trial on that first day. As I left court that day and contemplated returning in the autumn to finish trial, it occurred to me that I would have to write rather a lot to address the various procedural issues raised by Mr. Duncan in his tone and his verbal arguments. Now, ladies and gentlemen, do not get me wrong about this. I'd be happy to write until the cows came home about matters of substance relating to the guilt or innocence of the defendant and the liberty interests of the citizen vis-a-vis the constabulary. But the idea of having to disentangle all of that palaver, nonsense, and gobbledygook in the document Mr. Duncan presented to me was not particularly appealing. There is an ancient proverb to the effect that those whom the gods would destroy, they first make mad. The prospect of disentangling Mr. Duncan's adopted argument in his volume of internet-derived gibberish made me wonder if, for some reason, the gods had me in their crosshairs. This concern, however, was dissipated in mid-September 2012, when the gods made a benevolent nature clear. If December 7th, 1941 is a day that will live in infamy for anyone faced with freemen on the land or similar litigants, the 18th of September 2012 is a day that will shine in virtue. On that day, Mr. Justice J.P. Rook, the Associate Chief Justice of the Alberta Court of Queen's Bench, delivered a judgment in the matrimonial case of Meads versus Meads, 2012, ABQB 571. Given that this judgment weighs in at a mammoth 736 paragraphs, I wonder if these litigants are perhaps more prevalent in Wild Rose Country than they are in Ontario. Be that as it may, Justice Rook's comprehensive judgment of what he labels organized pseudo-legal commercial argument litigants of various iterations wonderfully frees me from having to address any more effort up to the jurisdictional arguments raised by Mr. Duncan. As I have said, there is a lot of patent rubbish on the internet. If Mr. Duncan wishes to while away a few hours more productively on something that actually makes sense, I commend Justice Rook's judgment on family.org to him. There is no merit to Mr. Duncan's jurisdictional argument. Such arguments are a waste of the court's time and resources, a selfish and or unthinking act of disrespect to other litigants, and deserving of no further attention, energy, or comment. With the distraction of the jurisdictional issue of safely off stage, we now have the luxury of focusing on old-fashioned notions like the merits of the case. Indeed, even before Justice Rook's gift to the judiciary, when we broke at the end of the first day of trial in July, at which point the Crown had closed its case, I suggested to the self-represented Mr. Duncan that he might want to use some of his internet skills to look at the actual issues related to the question of assault to resist arrest and the context of the Highway Traffic Act investigation. That it seemed to me that a defendant with counsel might be inclined to advance a non-suit motion in response to the evidence I had heard. When we returned to continue the trial, before calling on Mr. Duncan to announce that he was calling a defense, I asked the Crown to comment on whether or not there was a case to meet. I asked this because it seemed to me that whatever evidence the state might irregularly have possessed, the evidence as articulated at trial was seriously deficient. It also seemed to me that the case was based on an incomplete understanding of the Highway Traffic Act, i.e., that, in the words of another York agent Matthew, the trial's case was a house built upon sin. After hearing from the Crown, I dismissed the charge against Mr. Duncan, with more details to follow, these being those reasons. It is self-evident that a charge of assault to resist arrest requires a proof of a lawful arrest. This is not a charter issue. It is a fundamental element of the offense. The requirement reflects the important fact that in a democracy, agents of the state operate within limits. If an arrest is unlawful, resistance to that arrest is not unlawful. There are relatively few offenses under the Highway Traffic Act for which the police have a power of arrest. In the present case, the purported underlying arrestable offense committed by Mr. Duncan was his failure to identify himself under the Highway Traffic Act. In turn, his obligation to identify himself must be based on a lawful exercise of police power. In this case, under the Highway Traffic Act, while there may be other lawful foundations for a police demand to a driver to identify himself, the only one articulated in this case was Mr. Duncan's failure to signal his right and turn, which would originally make it an offense under Section 142 of the Act. The problem with the Count's case is that it is not an offense merely to make a turn or lane change without signaling. That is not what the Highway Traffic Act says. Rather, the Act provides a materially narrower offense as follows. Yada, yada, yada. On the evidence laid and articulated before me, in Mr. Duncan's trial, there is absolutely no basis for me to conclude that the operation of any other vehicle might have been affected by Mr. Duncan's allegedly uncivil turn. Neither officer adverted to any impact on them by the alleged failure to signal. Neither did they refer to any other vehicle being affected by it. Indeed, there is no reference whatsoever by either of them to the presence of any other vehicle anywhere close to them, and no rational basis for me to conclude that there were even other vehicles nearby just before 3 a.m. It is a fact of life the Highway Traffic Act often serves as the gateway into many more serious criminal investigations. But it is not carte blanche for all purposes. Here, the police reported to rely on a specific provision of the statute, and they either fail to appreciate what the statute actually requires, or fail to explain how the section was engaged by Mr. Duncan's alleged behavior that night. As I have said earlier, there may be other provisions in the Act that the officers could have relied upon to stop Mr. Duncan, but none was adverted to. If no lawful basis to stop has been articulated, there was no lawful basis to demand for ID. If there was no lawful demand for ID, the arrest failure to identify was unlawful. If the arrest was unlawful, assuming that Mr. Duncan resisted as described, he was entitled to do so. My fellow Americans, applying the test for a non-suit, given the absence of evidence for a lawful arrest, there was no evidence before me upon which a reasonable trial of fact properly instructed could find Mr. Duncan guilty of the charge of assault to resist arrest. So I did not call upon Mr. Duncan to advance the defense. Near the beginning of his comments to me at the outset of the trial, Mr. Duncan proclaimed that he had no obligation to produce identification to the police officers. In that moment, before he continued down the Alice in Wonderland garden of trusts and jurisdiction and dollar amounts and contracts and natural persons and administrators, Mr. Duncan momentarily hit upon the concept that would ultimately lead to his acquittal, albeit not by the rather circuitous and, with all due respect, silly path he wanted to go down. Applying the rather more prosaic concepts of the element of the events and analysis of who did what to whom why, The only conclusion reasonably open to me on the evidence at this trial was that the police and Crown failed entirely to articulate a lawful foundation for the attempt to arrest Mr. Duncan. The evidence before me failed to demonstrate that the purported arrest of Mr. Duncan was lawful. A citizen is entitled to resist an arrest that is unlawful. Thus, even assuming that I were to accept the police evidence of Mr. Duncan's actions as making out the assault beyond reasonable doubt, an issue that is not entirely free of controversy, a non-suit and thus an acquittal is the only outcome that is lawfully open to me from the evidence before me. Mr. Duncan is entitled to his acquittal, and none should begrudge him for it. In assessing how much of the free man of the land type of philosophy that he wishes to adopt in the future, a philosophy that appears to focus to an unhealthy degree on freedom from societal obligations, he might, however, wish to contemplate some more productive reading on the internet. Reading which emphasizes the importance of responsibilities as much as society's ongoing and sometimes exclusive fixation on rights. None of us is at the center of the universe, or as best expressed by John Donne, no man is an island entire of itself. Every many is a piece of the continent, a part of the main. Mr. Duncan did not strike me as a fool, and individual acts of seldom define people, but the red binder he offered to the officers and the affidavit of truth he offered to me in court were a regrettable descents into foolishness. And Mr. Duncan would be well advised to be more discriminating on what parts of the internet he models himself upon in the future. 26 March, 2013.
Thank you. Thank you. That's all I'm gonna that's all I'm gonna do. Thank you guys for listening in. If you like this and you want to see more of these, let me know. But I'm gonna stop it here. And yeah, you guys have fun. I might actually go back on live on my gaming channel for some Modern Warfare. Hopefully I can fix some things there. But thank you guys. I have an app that alters my voice and adds background music and everything like that. Thanks, Brad. And so yeah, it allows me to change my voice to a lot of different things. I know Blue Bacon has it as well, and so do I. So yeah. All right, guys. If you don't, I'll be heading on to my gaming channel in about I don't know, a few minutes or so. So if you want to watch me rage, look for me there. If not, I'll see you guys next time. Adios. What? Okay, kitty. Here you go. Get a kitty. I wish I was an affiliate. But oh well. The app is called Voice Mod. All right. Go. All right. See you guys later.